Hi everyone, my name is Carol Early and I am the secretary for Draft Learning for People's Party. I've been working closely with Nick Branagh since last December, and it's been a very rewarding experience. We have had a lot of non-mainstream media coverage, which and on the campaign too with Bernie, which I worked on, and that has really informed a lot of my experience and my viewpoint toward the mainstream media. I was a journalist, a mainstream media journalist for 15 years. I worked for the Detroit Free Press and Business Week magazine, and I've been in public relations for several years in the last, 20 years. But I've seen my former profession just go to pot, and I think that all of us here in this room know and are agreed that the mainstream media is not representing the 99%, and the independent media is where it's at. It's going to play an increasingly relevant and important role in our lives. And everyone here on this panel has been...
The others are coming.
Yeah.
They'll be here soon.
They've been doing so much in the past few years to educate and inform the public in ways that the mainstream media has refused to do. So it is going to be my pleasure to let them all introduce themselves and speak a little about their experience and background. There's 3 questions that they will be discussing. They are, number 1, what will happen to independent media if net neutrality is stripped away and eroded? Number 2, what can independent media do against attempts by government or social media empires to censor or otherwise control the message? And number 3, how can progressives and left media grow and further its impact in shaping the political discourse? So we will have, like I said, introductions, and then they will talk among themselves, and then we'll have probably about a half hour of questions that they will answer. So I will hand it off to you first.
Hello, guys. Yeah, sorry half our panel isn't here yet, but we're such alternative media that we don't go by your sense of time. But they are coming, at least they promise. But yeah, my name's Lee Camp. I host a show called Redacted Tonight on RT America. I also used to have a YouTube series called Moment of Clarity, which is how I ended up with a TV show. I think we can all agree. I don't need to spend time telling you how fucked up the mainstream media is, so I will. No, but when you really look at how you are allowed to have a very specific view on things, and it can be debate. You can have debates, but it has to be within this tiny window. And when people get outside of that window, you see them kicked out again and again, or forced out, or pushed out, or whatever it is. And I know you're familiar with some of the examples, but not everybody realizes just how large scale this is. So I wanted to go through a few of them. And for those of you who were here last night, Jimmy Dore showed several videos of Dylan Radigan, who now films from like a dentist office waiting room or like a parking lot or something. He's out in the woods of California somewhere. And I was on his show once back when he was on MSNBC, but he basically started saying things that didn't fit in their view. And the way he tells it was that the election was coming up between McCain and Obama, and they said, listen, you got to pick your side. Are you for McCain or for Obama? Whichever one you're for, you got to say every show, make it clear that you're for that guy. And he had no interest in doing that. He felt the two-party system was rigged and it did not help further our country, further us as in creating a sustainable, better society. And so he left, or was basically forced out. Cenk Uygur the same, went there for a couple of months, said he wasn't going to change. The way he tells it, they brought him into an office and said, listen, being an outsider is lots of fun, but you're not an outsider anymore. So either you get, toe the line, or your place is not here. Phil Donahue kicked out for not supporting the Iraq War, kicked off of MSNBC. Jesse Ventura, a lot of people don't know this, had a multi-million-dollar contract with MSNBC, lined up a brand new show that was about to start before the Iraq War, and the Iraq War was starting, and they found out he was against the war, and they said, "Can you change your position?" And he said, "No, I'm opposed to our imperial wars." And they paid him $1 million just to go away, just to never have his show on the air. That's worth $1 million to them. Another good example is Ashley Banfield. She was kind of not as well known, and she was a lower level reporter, I think at CNN maybe, or maybe MSNBC, but came out against the Iraq War, and they wouldn't let her out of her contract. They just stopped putting her on the air and basically locked her in a room. I mean, you know, she, I think, was allowed to go to the bathroom, but she basically had to show up to work every day, and they gave her nothing to do, and she sat in the copy room for like 3 years till her contract was out. And, you know, now she's back on the air with some incredibly vapid show on like CNN. So she learned her lesson, and now she doesn't speak out. They put her back in the box. Ed Schultz, there were, according to, it was either Fairness and Accuracy Reporting or Media Matters, during TPP, when it was being negotiated and no one was talking about it, not even Obama would mention it, it was all this hushed tones thing, it was mentioned 71 times on MSNBC over that 18-month period, 69 of which were on Ed Schultz's show. The 70th one was Ed Schultz on another show. So literally there's like a ban on the largest corporate trade deal that's ever existed to be spoken about, and soon thereafter Ed Schultz is no longer at MSNBC, now he's on RT America. Melissa Harris Perry, when she was forced out of MSNBC, went on Democracy Now! And she refused to sign the non-disclosure agreement, which almost all of them signed because it's, you know, who knows what the amount of money is, but it's a lot of money to basically just don't say anything about us. She refused to sign it, so, but to show you the example, I mean, she was forced out for several reasons, but to show you an example of just how much censorship these people are facing, she wanted to cover, she had all set to cover the Beyonce Super Bowl halftime show, or to talk about it, because it was Black Panther inspired and very fascinating. So these are the two most popular things in American culture, Beyonce and the Super Bowl, all right? And I'm including food and sex in that analysis. Two most popular things, and they came storming in and would not let her cover the Beyonce halftime show because apparently that's too controversial for American media to talk about something that's Black Panther inspired. And you know, that's the lever of censorship we're talking about. So these people are forced out if they go outside of this realm of coverage. And you know, and then there's Fox News where you only get forced out for sending dick pics to people. But but you know, we have gotten to a point where 90% of our airwaves are owned by 5 corporations that shrunk down to 5. It used to be 80 or something years ago. So I'll wrap up here in a second, but I want to give the hopeful part of this, which is despite the continued crackdown of alternative media that is going on right now, because what happened with Bernie Sanders in the last campaign was very scary to them. The fact that he could achieve such success without the mainstream coverage is very scary to our ruling establishment. And so you see them cracking down on alternative media. They demonetized a lot of programs on YouTube. That Facebook now has their fake news checkers, which are several news organizations, including things like ABC News. So now ABC News can mark any story on Facebook as fake news, and that basically destroys their algorithm, so they're not going to be shown to anybody anymore. So it's a continued crackdown. But the hopeful part is that we are still at a place where media, because of social media, because of the internet, is still far more open, and you're seeing people wake up. And America now apparently has about 6% of America have full faith and belief in the mainstream media. So that is incredible. That is you know, waking up of a level I don't know that we've ever seen. It's just a matter of channeling this awareness in the right directions and not towards things like Donald Trump. But I think there could be a lot of hope here. There could be a real way forward if we really continue to fight for it.
Hi everyone, I'm Eleanor Goldfield. I'm a creative activist, journalist, and poet based currently out of DC. I have a show that airs on Occupy.com and Free Speech TV called Act Out. And to sort of follow with the silver lining that Lee mentioned, I think that the important thing to note is that I personally don't have a journalism degree. I dropped out of college because I found it to be boring. And I say that in college. But I think that the important thing to note is that there are so many citizen journalists out there. There are so many people that are on the front lines that are documenting what's happening that would never get shown on corporate media. I remember outside of DNC in Philadelphia, they were covering, what was it? It was like ABC or something that was covering the protests, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, we got to cut back to something else now.
Boys to Men.
Boys to Men was about. So they pulled the feed from the guy who was standing in the middle of protests outside the gates of the DNC to go to Boys to Men, which. But meanwhile, while that was happening, there were a bunch of citizen journalists out there, including myself, that were documenting it and throwing it up online, and there was a constant feed of information going out to the people. The other thing, though, is that people that aren't citizen journalists, that don't have the ability or the capacity to be on all front lines at all times, obviously, it is kind of on us and you and all of us to find that information. Unfortunately, the days of just turning on your television and getting an honest talking head telling you the situation of the world, that doesn't exist. So you do have to dig for it sometimes, especially with the ongoing crackdowns against media and potentially dealing with the end of net neutrality. We are going to have to work a lot harder to find the information that's actually accurate, that's happening on the front lines. And part of that is, we have to have fake news filters too. We have to be able to not just see something on Facebook that looks juicy and then share it. We have to have the due diligence to check and make sure that that's accurate, because we are sharing this information with huge swaths of people, and it's our job, even if you don't consider yourself a journalist or a media person or even a social media person, before you share something, do your due diligence. And the other part of that is that you will oftentimes come into contact with other people that you can follow that have written similar articles or done similar shows about that subject matter, and so then you can go further. You can go further with that, and also kind of shifting our paradigm of how we think of media. A lot of corporate media you don't technically pay for. You do kind of in a kind of roundabout way with corporate taxes and corporate subsidies, but you don't have to pay to watch the corporate talking heads. A lot of independent media runs off of almost nothing. I myself have a Patreon page. Most of my comrades who are also citizen journalists have Patreon pages. Consider donating to citizen journalists. And it's not just like, oh, I want to buy you a cup of coffee. It's like, I want to make sure that you can get to Standing Rock. I want to make sure that you can get to Ferguson. I want to make sure that you can get to the places and tell us what's really going on, because the corporate media is not going to. So consider, when you consider giving money to community organizers, also consider the media as a part of that, and supporting the people who have the want and ability to go out and get those stories. So yeah, just wrapping up, I guess it is a silver lining, but it is also putting some accountability on all of us to be to take the initiative and dig for the truth, and not just accept it as it's placed in front of us on TV or on social media.
Jimmy?
Okay. I'm not as smart as she is, and so I'm sorry I was late. First of all, I was busy saving a baby and making a baby. That's right, I was making. Right. Same thing. Catholic, so it's the same thing. So, I just kind of happened into this accidentally, right? I was just a comedian and nightclub comedian, touring the country for about 15, 20 years, and then
Damn good one, though.
thank you are, thank you, and please call my dad. And so what happened was, for me, was the Iraq War happened, and it felt like I was living in a movie. That people who I always relied on to be smart and whatever and make sure things didn't get out of control, were beating the drums for war, as was our mainstream news media, the Washington Post, that I talk about a lot in my show, and I show the editorial that they wrote, just belittling anyone who didn't go along with the Iraq War narrative, right? And so on all the papers, except for McClatchy, right? There was like a handful of guys at McClatchy that pushed back against it. So it was watching the complete failure of the media. By the way, it happened again. It happens all the time. We're right in the middle of another one, the Russia thing, right? So this is amazing how xenophobia just is allowed in mainstream media. That's all it is. And I've seen news people tweeting how about they hate Russians. It's just crazy. It's the craziest thing. So that's why, I remember talking to Cenk Uygur and asking him why he decided to start he has a wolf pack, which is that thing to get money out of politics. And I'm like, Cenk, aren't you? First of all, I feel exhausted just having to do one stand-up show a night, but he's doing all this stuff, and I go, isn't that tiring for you to try to do? Why are you doing that too? And he said, because, I was at dinner with my dad, and I was telling him how we gotta get money out of politics, and my dad said, yeah, who? And he said, well, I guess I'll have to do it. And so that's when he started doing that, and so that's why I do what I do. People are like, why do you do your show? Why do you live? Because no one else is doing it, right? No, I see, what's happening in the media. I see the corrupting power of corporate money to take people who I respect, people who used to be union reporters in Chicago where I'm from, and now they work for MSNBC, and they're just the biggest tools. And it just drives me crazy that it falls on what I consider myself to be a jag-off nightclub comedian to frame the issues correctly and tell the truth to the people about war. And it's still happening right now. Right now, it's unbelievable to me. Right now, the Democrats went along with a $100 billion increase to Barack Obama's military budget. We still don't have an enemy. Russia spends about $65 billion a year, and we're still. So that's why I'm doing what I do, and I can't believe there aren't more people doing it. Thank God there's a huge corporation like Google and YouTube to provide a platform. And then demonetized when I do videos telling the truth about war. So that's okay, because like the people on this panel, I also have a Patreon, and so it is unbelievably important, and you can support. And there was a union vote in Mississippi recently, nobody covered it. I helped sponsor a journalist who went down there to cover it, right, an independent. So that's the only way we're going to get the truth, is independent media, and they are trying to squelch it. Just look what happened. Right now, the corporate media that we are offered, the lefty media and mainstream media, is MSNBC, which is owned by Comcast, which fired Schultz because he talked too loudly against the TPP. So the next time you watch that station, know that anything that those people are telling you is not costing Comcast a nickel, because the moment that Rachel Maddow says something that costs them a nickel, she will be fired like that, or sent to the weekend, or something will happen. But she doesn't, which is why she's still there, and all of them are there. Just know that what they're doing is not costing Comcast a penny. I just did a segment on my show with Ali Veshi, who I love. He's a great reporter. He's from Canada. I showed him how he really talks the truth about single payer and stuff like that. And then he talked about net neutrality the other day in a way like he didn't know it out. I don't know what it's about. The guy's got to cut deals to make money. And I'm watching this, and my head almost exploded watching a guy who I know is smarter than that do that. And all I want is to, call Phil Griffin and say, I'm willing to sell out also. No one's offered. But I'll take just about anything for $30,000 a day. And but that hasn't come my way. But if it does, I'm willing. And, so I think it's more important than ever we have this. The big corporations want to keep net neutrality, which may be the thing that saves it. I don't know. But I agree, you have to support independent media, and people don't trust the media. I think the media's ratings, the mainstream news media's ratings are lower than Trump's and Hillary Clinton's, and maybe even Congress. So people are seeing through it, and it's not just here, it's in all Western media. It's in UK too. We highlight how they trashed Jeremy Corbyn, and at some point the attacks on progressives started to have the opposite effect. It starts to build us up, and so, all right, I'll stop talking.
I don't know what the question was, but I'm going to go with my answer anyways. I'm a miserable liberal, Stef Zamorano, and I'm one of the producers of the Jimmy Dore Show. And I just want to tell you my journey, if I can. And I'm a high school English teacher. And thank you for that applause break. Teacher haters, okay?
Money grubber.
Yeah, I am, thank you. I stash all my money in my trunk of my Tercel. Right?
Yeah, that's right. She could have went to Wall Street and helped people. She followed that money train all the way to sophomore English.
Very good. So I just want to share as a high school English teacher. Oh, there's so many things to say here. I would teach the book called The Pearl by John Steinbeck. And it's about a family, Kino and Juana. Their life turns upside down after their child has been bitten by a scorpion. And they go to the doctor in the town. And the doctor says, send them away. Gosh, can we relate to that right now?
Yeah.
And I find that the story also involves how the community is corrupt and how the community has taken advantage of the natives. Sound familiar? And Kino goes and finds a pearl. He dives for the pearl. It's the pearl of the world. And now everything will work out because he has money. Except the system is rigged. When he goes to give his pearl to the pearl merchants, there's really only one pearl merchant. There might be 5 at the table, but there's only one real pearl merchant there who's calling the shots. And they say, this is an awful pearl. It's monstrous. And Kino says, I'm going to take it to La Paz then. I'm going to take it to the city. But nobody's ever come back from the city. He goes, he risks his life. He's trailed. They want to get him, and they want that pearl. It's sad. He struggles. This is all to save his child. And I will teach this novel every year. And it was awful because all of a sudden there'd be a baby in the news that was refused services. Or then you have a guy named, like, what's his name, Martin Shkreli, who decides to take medication and and increases the price by what, 700%? No big deal. Asshole. And I would teach these lessons to my students, and I would tell them, I'd go, we're the natives. We're the natives. We're being taken advantage of. And I was a heretic in my school. The administration didn't like me. It was tough. I loved being in the classroom and teaching kids and using current events to make what we're learning in the classroom more meaningful. But what can you teach them when these kids have been in war all their lives and they don't even know it?
Yeah.
They're not even informed. They were born while we're in war. How many wars are we in? 7?
7.
They don't know it.
Who's counting?
I lost count. What they're upset about, are they going to get an A in English? So how do I connect media to my life? I'm lucky enough to work on a really interesting, entertaining, engaging show right now. And we're doing it through YouTube. And there's this whole Wild West on YouTube that's opened up to us. And we're embracing it. And we're trying to do as many videos as we can. And if we don't cover something that you think is important, it's because we feel like we're not covering enough. So my journey is just beginning because instead of returning to work this year as a high school English teacher, I'm taking a year off, and I probably will never go back. Because I think I have a new journey ahead of me. And I don't have those same restrictions as I did as a teacher in the classroom. So if I expose myself from a certain point of view, I'm no longer that vulnerable. So you're part of my journey.
Stef, the question was, where do you live?
So my name is Placone. I work for the Jimmy Dore Show. Before that, I was a road comic that lived in my car. So it's a fun time. But so You know, the media, I mean, I studied media policy as well. It's always been of interest to me. And a lot of, everybody pretty much so far has brought up the conflicts of interest that the corporate media has. And I actually make an effort to, I try really hard, and it's hard to do because it's so, like, among us. I try not even to say mainstream media, because I feel like that's almost patting it on the back. It's not a mainstream media. This is mainstream media. Because this is people interacting with one another. Right. This is mainstream media. They're a corporate media. They're owned by an elite group that has a very specific agenda. You know, why do people play dumb about net neutrality on MSNBC? Well, because they're owned by Comcast. Why is the corporate media never inherently anti-war? Well, they've been owned by General Electric and stuff like that. I mean, these are just conflicts of interest 101. And social movements is another big. I mean, a media theorist named Todd Gitlin wrote about the marginalization of social movements back in the 60s, starting with the SDS. And that model is still followed today, whether it be Occupy or Black Lives Matter, or even us, to tell you the truth. I mean, yesterday there was a member of the corporate media that was walking around, and I'm not going to say, but
I can see a mustache. I saw a mustache.
We may or may not have a history on Twitter, but that person was there to marginalize the movement, and they posted pictures on Twitter, and the goal was to make fun of it. You know, my back was turned during the photo because that's courage. And but anyway, so you see this going on, and what's interesting about the pseudo-democratic experiment called the United States that we're all part of is prior to the 20th century, we had arguably one of the coolest media structures in the world. And there's a guy named Bob McChesney that's like one of my favorite media guys that writes books about all this stuff. I recommend checking him out. And you know, the average metropolitan area had about 10 different newspapers, and that of course was the only medium because they didn't have, you know, radio even back then. But and these newspapers were founded on different schools of political thought, and they were subsidized by the government through the Postal Service because that's how they were distributed. And if you were distributing media, you got a subsidy depending on your needs. So constitutionalists, federalists, socialists, they all had their own different newspapers. And voter turnout was also over 80% back then. I have a feeling those two things are slightly related, call me radical. But so somehow we have to get back to a model like that. And I think you're kind of seeing it with people kind of taking matters into their own hands. You know, I mean, you know, when I was in college, I watched Jimmy's first stand-up special in 2004. And if I had a time machine and could have visited my teenage self and said, hey, one day you're gonna work for that dude, I don't know what my first question would have been. I don't know if my first question would have been, I become a comedian? Or if my first question would have been, what the fuck's YouTube? Like, I don't know what the first question would have been. But so things are constantly evolving, and you know, I don't want to touch too much on net neutrality yet, because I know that's the first question, but we're facing the Telecommunications Act of our generation, which is net neutrality. So there's always going to be evolving mediums. Some of them we can't even predict, but there's always going to be a power structure that tries to stifle those. And we need to be aware that there's a corporate media that is not going to tell us the truth about war, not going to tell us the truth about environmental issues, and not going to tell us the truth about any type of social movement that disrupts the status quo, because that status quo is their gravy train. So, you know, the solution is definitely independent media that is somehow sustainable. So, thanks.
Tim?
Hey. I'm sorry for being late, guys. I really apologize about that. I think, yeah, so I guess the question is, tell you a little bit about yourself. I appreciate it. Who am I? Why am I here? Right? I'm Tim Black. I do a web show. And who I am is you. Just one of you guys, man. fighting for what I believe in, trying my best to speak truth to power, to speak truth for the powerless. I worked for a local, small newspaper in DC called DC Capital Spotlight back in the 90s. And I remember they had me covering Mystic bottles, right? So I went to a press conference, Mystic bottle, whatever. They had a story in the newspaper about them being white nationalists or something to that extent. So I went to this thing and they're talking, and it seemed more like a puff piece they were looking for. They're looking for me to just regurgitate what they say and put it in the article. I go back to my editor and I say, I don't feel good about this. You know, I feel like they didn't give me really any information. I don't know the other side of the story. And he said something that I don't think you're hearing MSNBC or CNN or any of the other corporate media entities. He said, if you don't feel good about it, screw it, don't write it. He said, don't write the article. We don't need to cover it if you don't feel good about it. Unfortunately, that job didn't pay enough for me to continue. But I love news. And it was a great opportunity to learn and get involved. So you fast forward years later, I always had a thing for speaking, hoping I could get back into it, but computers pay the bills, right? So I guess through just happenstance, I got laid off, but I had started building a YouTube channel. Actually, I started podcasting, and people said, Tim, we like it. I want you to do a video, so I did a couple videos. And then when I finally got laid off, so to speak, I was already doing my thing. I said, well, I'll just keep going. Just keep talking, I wasn't into politics, I was into social issues. Things that people that I know dealt with. Things that affected us. Regular news, regular local news, so to speak. And one of my subscribers, he said, Tim, you need to check out Bernie Sanders. He said, man, you gotta check him out. And I didn't know like anything about Bernie Sanders, about progressivism, none of that stuff. But I became educated. I became excited about the possibility of all types of people understanding one another in ways the media does not truly explain. You know, they kind of section us all off. They say, you're a black guy, you're from the city, you're from Washington, D.C., what could you have in common with Victor Tiffany? You know, he's a white guy from the Midwest, so no, actually Jersey or the East Coast or whatever. Actually a lot more than the corporate media would like you to believe. So that's sort of what happened, man. I just went on this journey, I'm still on this journey. I'm finding out more and more. I'm happy to say that I've got a lot of people on my platform, and we have a good time fighting every day for what we believe in, and I encourage everyone else to fight in your own way, to go on your own journey, and spread the love.
I'd like to ask each of you to talk a little bit about what can independent media do against attempts by government or social media, as Lee alluded to, empires that are trying to censor or otherwise control the message.
Shall I begin? Well, there's a lot. I think we kind of got to treat it the way water running down a river treats some sort of blockade. We just have to find ways around it and keep pounding away, but keep coming up with new answers. It's kind of like activism tactics. You know, I was at Occupy from the earliest days, but occupying was a tactic, and it will be used again, but it can't be the only tactic. And the more they realize that one tactic, how to stop one tactic, how to infiltrate it, how to cut it off, you need to find new ways to grow and move around. So I think what we have over the corporate structure is a flexibility, a malleability to change and move and grow perhaps quicker than something that is more top down. And so I think, and you are seeing, you know, these efforts are being done right now. As I said earlier, they were the ruling elite were very scared by what happened with both Donald Trump getting elected. I may fucking hate the guy, but he did come out and you know, he was able to get elected when the normal structures that stop something like him failed. The mainstream media, they gave him 23 times the coverage Bernie got, but they did try to sink his campaign, I think, legitimately, and failed, and because of things like Twitter and stuff like that. And so I think they're very scared of both that and Bernie and what Bernie Sanders was able to achieve. So you're seeing this attempt to sideline all alternative media, independent voices, the fake news thing that, yes, there is some actual fake news out there, and there's plenty of things that are not fake news, and there's plenty of fake news coming from CNN and MSNBC and all the rest. But it's being used to sideline voices like the people up here on this panel, and we need to keep growing and changing to defeat these things. We've been demonetized and demonized, but we're going to keep at it and keep finding new platforms. I think that, although one of my biggest platforms in terms of number of followers and everything is Facebook, I also realize that they're going to keep undermining my feed on Facebook until they successfully sideline it nearly completely. And so I have to find other platforms and grow those platforms. And there are certain social media platforms, and I'm not that bright on net stuff, but there are certain platforms that this cannot be done with because the way they're being structured, there is no one controlling the feeds. And I think that will be the future if we can just get more people to migrate over to these types of setups that don't have anyone that decides what is seen and what isn't seen. And so I very much hope we get to that future in time, that these things cannot be sidelined. And I just want to say that I think that a lot of us, if you're in here, you care about it. And the thing that's kind of kept me going through my career or each new step was, when you think about doing something, just go do it. Don't wait for anyone to tell you it's okay to do it. Don't wait for anyone to tell you it's the time to do it. That doesn't mean you'll succeed at all of it. I've had plenty of failed projects, but I'd say the two most pivotal ones for me were a book I self-published in college because no fucking publisher was going to tell me they wanted my stuff, and then the YouTube channel that I started that ultimately ended up kind of becoming a TV show. But the YouTube channel, no one was watching it for the first year or whatever it was. But I just decided it was something I was going to do anyway, and I didn't care that I like Jimmy. I spent it's coming up on 20 years, but before the YouTube channel, about 15 years as a stand-up comic. And I was playing all the clubs and everything, but no one in corporate media had any interest in a comedian that was talking about these issues. They didn't want me on Comedy Central or anything else. And they knew me. I'm at the New York clubs every day. I'm doing great. I mean, the audiences are laughing, but it didn't matter. They have no interest in that type of comedy. So luckily, I live in a time that you can go on YouTube and these other places and just speak your mind. And as YouTube continues to go after all of these shows, we'll have to move to a new platform. But I do believe we can get there. The net neutrality thing is incredibly scary. I think we need to keep trying to inform people about it. Obviously, this decision could be made in the next couple of months, but I think people need to become informed and realize that it is a corporate decision to completely undermine alternative platforms, smaller platforms, mom and pop shops, all that stuff. So just keep informing people and get the message out there, and don't wait for anyone to tell you can do something. Just do it, and if you fail, learn something.
What was the question?
Where do you live?
We're talking about what do you think can be done to combat social media and corporate media and groups like Facebook that are sensitive and making your lives much harder.
I think, Facebook is going to start helping us decide what's real news and what's not, so I think that's fantastic, because I don't know. And I would leave it up to a billionaire who sold the idea for his website. Fantastic. I don't go on Facebook because it makes me feel bad. When, I can be on for 5 seconds and I feel bad already, like, oh, I didn't know you were an asshole. Oh, I thought you were a nice person, you're a racist. All right. So I don't, and it just seems like people live on there, like it is it's like an alternate life for people. People talk about Facebook like it's a real life. It's not. It's just a thing. And so, and they've also done studies now where the more your time you're on social media, the higher your anxiety level, and the less your happiness, higher your stress, and more prone to depression, right? So that's why I just stay on Twitter, because it's all evil, and that fuels me. But what we can do to push back against corporate media, I guess, is the only thing we can do is to keep speaking our truth and finding platforms to do it. Net neutrality, YouTube, Google is for net neutrality, right? Because it helps them, I think, with YouTube. So we might be protected by that. My show being on YouTube, who knows? My show's also on the radio and nationwide and stuff like that. But the real impact came when I got on YouTube. That has a real power for a lot of people, and people also use YouTube as Google. It's like a search engine, right, for news, and so that's helpful. But we need Teddy Roosevelt to come back and break up the media companies. We need him to break up the banks. We need him to break up the telecommunication, everything. All right, we need capitalism is bad to start with, but there's ways to help kind of brace for the brutalities of a capitalistic system, and we got to get back to implementing those. I think. I don't know. I hope I answered the question.
I'll wait, and I was just sitting here listening to everybody's responses, and I was thinking about Les Moonves. When he came out and he said something to the effect of, I know, like, we filmed his podium empty, Donald Trump's, but we were making so much money while doing that. Well, while filming an empty podium, they were more interested in ratings. What's crazy Donald Trump going to say next? Let me give you more free publicity by just filming your empty podium. It was crazy. They would talk about Donald Trump while Bernie Sanders was speaking to a live audience. He would be on mute and they would be talking about Donald Trump. And to pretend for 1 second it's a liberal media. It's bought, it's sold to the highest bidder, and what they're confused about are the millennials. How are we going to get the millennials to buy into this corporate media? Because the millennials aren't there. They're not watching TV. I know a couple of us in this room, the only thing we watch on TV is Game of Thrones, and that's it.
Jeopardy.
Okay, Jeopardy as well. Thank you, I forgot. And then that's one aspect, that they're complicit in this machinery. And then the other thing was when I saw Jorge Ramos thrown out of a press room while Donald Trump was running for president, and everybody kind of sat there, took some pictures, videotaped it, hardly outraged whatsoever. Why would we ever think that this guy would take away any of our civil rights when he's doing that so publicly? So I don't think, I don't think we're going to get net neutrality. I think we'll get something that looks neutral. And we won't ever really know the shenanigans that is being created behind the scenes, the algorithms, whatever, that will keep us away from getting news. But I think the rebels here on stage are really trying to do a service of communicating an idea in an honest way. We're grappling with these problems in our country and in the universe, and we're just trying to figure it out along with you. And I think our personal goals on the Jimmy Dore Show is to try to communicate our frustrations and the facts. And if we get something wrong, you can bet that we'll be back to talk about it as well. We're not committed to just keeping a flawless facade. That we have imperfections because we don't really have much of a budget. You know, so we're competing with these, you know, corporations getting out the news, and we're just trying to communicate honestly with our audience.
I just one correction, if I did something wrong, I delete that video and I never mentioned it.
I'll edit that out. But that's it.
So with the idea of censorship, I think that, I don't know if we're on the net neutrality question, but since other people are bringing it up, I'll jump on that bandwagon too. So regardless of what happens with net neutrality, we haven't seen net neutrality fail in other countries, but what we have seen is we have seen kill switches be flipped in countries such as Egypt. During the Arab Spring, they flipped the kill switch there so that people couldn't communicate via Twitter. And what you saw immediately happening on the ground was hacktivists throwing up, I don't know how you do this, but they were like making internet via tin cans and stuff. However that happens, we have hacktivists among us. And I think that what you're going to be seeing, regardless of what happens with net neutrality this year, you're going to see more and more hacktivists, more digital geniuses that put out alternatives that are completely decoupled from the corporate entities, completely decentralized. And this is where you will find not only new social media, but you'll also find the news that's still coming from the front lines. And I think in the interim, it's also important to support things like the Creative Commons, sharing things online via platforms that, like YouTube or Facebook or Twitter or what have you, use the big corporations and their spread while you still have them. But I also think you don't have to use Google as a search engine because you might be familiar with what happened during the election, and Google was like you couldn't search like Hillary war criminal, like that shit wouldn't show up.
Right.
So don't use Google. There are so many other search engines out there, like if Pizza plants a tree every time you do a search. DuckDuckGo hides your searches. So there are other engines out there that you can use that aren't Google. And even, just compare and contrast the searches that you get when you try Google versus DuckDuckGo, for example. And also, I think another way to kind of circumvent the issue of censorship is obviously go to the people that you already know and trust and see who they're following. Like I was a musician, and one of my favorite things always to do was to see the idol of my idols and find new and exciting music that way. It's the same thing with media. Go to the people that you already trust and listen to and see who they're listening to. See who they're on panels with or what have you. And also do the same thing with social movements. So if you go to like a Black Lives Matter page, like a local Black Lives Matter page, and you see that they just got a really good investigative journalist write up in that, blank media, we'll start following that media page and start seeing what else they're putting out there. There are ways to find the media that is important, and I think those are a few good ways to circumnavigate the censorship that's already happening.
How many people out there are interested in doing their own broadcasts, podcasts? Is that what this is about? Censorship, it really does suck. There's a lot of it going on. But what I've been having to do is be everywhere, right? So I'm on YouTube, but I'm also on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Periscope. You gotta really diversify where you put your content. And this demonetization thing that's going on where every video I put up, we're talking, I got maybe 2,700 videos on YouTube on my main channel. They demonetize 85% of that. And every new video I put up is automatically demonetized, so I'm not making anything off of it. So of course that bummed me out because you gotta sustain if you wanna create, right? But this is the thing, it's actually a bonus. Kind of weird, right? This is the thing. Once I realized that I wasn't going to make any type of revenue off YouTube, it freed me up to say, you know what? What the hell? It's all about awareness. It's all it's about spreading your message. So now, hey, I put my videos, everything up on Facebook as well, everything up on Twitch and everything everywhere else because it's about reaching as many people as possible. For instance, DACA, right? I looked at that. I looked at the way they were talking about the issue. Of course, we don't want people getting, we don't want these young people or any people being dragged out of the country who haven't committed a crime. That's just crazy, right? But the context of the discussion, the context of why Obama put that in place to begin with was to, in my opinion, was to distract people from the actual issue that he was the deporter in chief. So it was sort of like throw a cookie to the kids, make them feel good. Meanwhile, I'm dragging their parents and everyone in their neighborhood out of the country. And I said, you know what? I have to be able to talk about these issues, regardless if you make it down. But people need to know that. That's why that message need not only be on YouTube, where Google can step on it. It needs to be everywhere else. And something I'm slacking on, I left out. That my discussion about DACA needs to also be on my own website. Net neutrality, it's scary, and we know what they put it in place to do, which is to control the message. But best way to fight is diversify, but I can't stress enough, get your own website. Don't be like me, I've got a website, I don't update it enough, update your website. And the more places you are. And also come to things like this. There's nothing like meeting people in person. The internet can only go so far. Personal interactions are where it's at. So I hope that makes sense. But that's what I'm doing.
He also has a killer Tinder account. So.
When it comes to censorship, Crane Britton wrote in Anatomy of a Revolution that real change happens when people demonstrate through their daily actions that a status quo is just dead, that it's just not working anymore, that it's over. When it comes to media, that is already happening. Corporate media is wondering how they're going to get the millennials. I'll speak for myself and all the other millennials because I can say this with a lot of confidence. You're not. We're over it. You're not getting us. People are fleeing cable television news, and I don't just mean on the TV, I mean in all the available mediums. They're fleeing in droves because people see through it. People are turning to alternative media sources. They're turning to indie media sources. A lot of us wouldn't have our jobs if the corporate media wasn't so awful. So that's why we're here in many ways, and that's a good thing. But so people are demonstrating that status quo is null and void, and there's a lot of entities that once the profit motive is gone from corporate media, they're going to flee as well. So as far as navigating censorship, the demonetization thing has hurt a lot of independent entities, ours included. But I like to try to see it as an opportunity to try to be held accountable by the only group I want to be held accountable by, and that is our viewers and our listeners and the people that care about what we're doing.
I have one last question for the panelists before we open it up for questions. How can progressive and left media grow and further its impact in shaping the political discourse? Maybe do you want to?
Let me think here. No, I'll just give up. I think we've covered a lot of it. I think most of our answers have involved something about how you should all just do it and move forward, and don't wait for anyone to tell you it's time. Don't wait for there to be an obvious way to make a lot of money from it. I never made anything from my YouTube show back when I was doing it, and it was. But it also speaks to what it is we have over the corporate media, over the ruling elite, is that, and I truly believe this, we have alternative media, or a lot of us, I mean maybe there's a few exceptions, have the passion for change, have the passion for these issues. Yes, we want to make enough money to be able to survive, but we're not in it for the money. And it actually gives us an incredible advantage because we're a lot harder to stop from simple blockades, from simple hurdles, if you're in it for the passion. If, like Tim says, you know, it hurts him that so much has been demonetized, but he wasn't in it for that to begin with. So he's not going to stop the fight to make people aware because things are demonetized. So to me, that is where our superpower is, and that's why you see independent media continuing to kind of win this battle in a lot of ways, in that corporate media is so disrespected and maligned, and people are still getting their, despite all of these hurdles that have been put in front of us, still getting their media from these outside sources, is because so many people are doing it for things other than the profit motive. And to me, that's really where our victory, our success could come, is that passion. And you know, that's why I'm excited to be up here with so many people that are so passionate about these things. And I try and find the people I work with, or the people that are in these movements, that are really in it truly for the passion of change. Because if you're not in it for that, then you'll either give up because there's not enough money there, or you'll find the money and just go that way. You know, I know Jimmy said he's just waiting for the right amount, but don't worry, you'll get there, buddy. I don't believe him. You didn't hear it. She said Eleanor.
Oh, sorry. Yes, that's me. So I absolutely agree with that. And I think in terms of growing the progressive media, I think just like I said, that media is a part of the social movements that we're all a part of and working with. That idea of working together is also really important. There is a lot of drama in the left media as well. And I think it's important that we recognize the difference between agreeing on everything and allowing ourselves to devolve into a fight over it. I'm sure that all of us here don't agree on everything, and it'd be creepy if we did. I think it's important that as media that we disagree on certain things, because that will have an effect on what we cover, on how we cover it. And then all of us as viewers will get different perspectives, which is important. It's important to have that sort of variety. And that doesn't mean that you watch a fascist and then you want to watch our shows, but it does mean that you get a difference in perspective. And that is really important, and that media and everybody else is able to work together on the left to promote those messages that go after the truth, that go to the front lines, that work with people on the ground, that highlight community organizers and the important work that's happening. So I think that's how it will grow, if we can stop arguing about small details that aren't important, and not wanting to tear each other down. Like if somebody has a bigger following, or if somebody said something nice about somebody you don't like, it's okay. Get yourself a punching bag or something, and then come to the table and talk about the things that you can agree with each other on. And you know, again, like outside the DNC, like I was talking to some people that were there to highlight the Green Party. So a couple of people there were arguing about or debating about, you know, Bernie's foreign policy, or they didn't like Jill Stein because of this, that, and the other. That's fine. Have those debates, have them on camera, have them online, and let's keep the conversation going. And as media people, don't shy away from your opinion. I think it's important that we as media people not try to pretend that we're totally impartial, because then you do have things like a while back CNN had the highlight, the name for that panel was "Are Jews Really People?" It was an alt-right question, and I'm sitting there looking at this and I didn't know that it was still a question as to whether I was a person. But so if that is the kind of situation that we're looking at, if you have to be totally neutral, fuck that. I'm totally not neutral on my show. I'm very vocal about my perspective on things. And as a media person, I actually think it's important that you are. But at the same time, that you don't lambaste people that are in reality working towards the same goals that we are on the left.
just been trying to inject more pettiness and backbiting into the. Otherwise, it's boring. And I define myself by my enemies. So. Stef?
Oh, okay. All right, so about, I don't know, like 10 years ago, we started to work for Pacifica Radio. And when I say work, I mean we did everything for free. Nothing worked there. The microphones didn't work. It's a radio station. The sound didn't work. It was crazy. So the idea, I brought them up because it was funny because there's like this political atmosphere in places that you work. You know, there's always some sort of politics, bureaucracy, or whatever. So we decided to leave KPFK, continue to produce our stuff for KPFK, but produce it in our studio that we put together.
That was crowdsourced.
Yes, so we did. And I think the propaganda machine is alive and well. And there's one thing, like right now we're sitting with this idea, like keep getting all these emails from the DNC about Kamala Harris. I don't know how to say it, okay? And they really want me to like her. Boy, they want me to like her a lot. And I feel like as a woman of color, brown, that I have a certain responsibility to stick my chin out and start challenging this kind of machinery. And it's uncomfortable because a lot of people like her. She's pretty. She wears high heels, okay? But when I saw her last week say, well, I have a little bit of breaking news. I'm going to co-sponsor Medicaid. Girl, that might be a surprise to my campaign team. How cute she was. Wasn't she cute? How she said that she's surprising her campaign or her team or her staff. Thank you, Jimmy. Her staff. And I was just like, are you kidding? You don't even know what it is. You call them Medicaid. Right? So I feel, the idea on how to shake it up politically is not to stay in lockstep with the status quo. So that's the best I can do right now, and I hope I get completely armed with all the facts, because I don't think she speaks to me, and I'm wondering how they're going to force her down my throat. So, that's all I got to say about that. Next.
So, I became pretty far to the left early on in college. And the reason for that was mostly the Iraq War. Some of my friends that signed up for ROTC just so they could pay for college were being shipped over there. I have a cousin that did 4 tours in Afghanistan that will never be the same. I mean, he has ridiculous PTSD, has not had successful treatment, it ruined his engagement that he had at the time. And I wondered why the hell we were over there. Still do wonder why we're doing what we're doing, and none of the answers are good, but
We're helping people around.
we're spreading democracy because we mastered it here. But so
They're called drone democracy.
So I read, I started reading Noam Chomsky. I saw the movie Al Fox, et cetera, et cetera. My point for bringing that up, Donald Trump, who is doing the same things that a lot of our politicians had done, but has no interest in any subtlety, is the best recruitment tool for the left, maybe in all of our lifetimes, really. I mean, this guy is just, so now is a really good time, I think, to be part of progressive media, to care about causes, and, you have to have a point of view that stands out from the corporate media, and with the constraints they have, that's not very hard. That being said, that there's plenty of outlets out there that are pretty much just, if you just bought a parrot and had that parrot watch NBC 7 hours a day, you would get the same thing. But if you want to do something different than that, now is the time. those channels are more accessible, and I do think there's like a community aspect to it. You know, I mean, I grew up on punk rock. I would you know, discover other bands from labels I was into. So it is cool when it's like, well, you like this channel, well, what are they listening to? What network is this part of? What are these people doing over here? What journalists inspire the stories that we tell jokes on, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that naturally the world at large is going to help grow all of this, and I think that is a silver lining.
How can progressive and left media grow? Don't quit. Like, seriously, guys, don't quit. That's the thing, man. When I started doing videos 5 years ago, there were a lot of people who started around the same time, and it didn't happen quick enough for them, and they left. And it really sucks because they were good, you know, good at what they were doing. They had great messages, and you know, it took two and a half, maybe 3 years for me to hit a video that really like hit mass awareness. You know what I'm saying? Like millions of views. And that video landed me on CBS. And I got excited. This is great. I'm on, you know, I'm on Dr. Phil's show. Wow, everything's gonna change, right? Nothing changed, man. I mean, don't get me wrong. It was nice going to Cali for the first time. Nice being on an airplane for the first time. They've never done that, right? Got to do it for free. So it was cool, cool hotel. But life didn't change, so I went right back to work, man. I just kept doing it. And I just, whenever you face an obstacle, you just plow through it. I'm proud to say that a lot of people on this panel have been on my channel. So collaborations are really important. All right, so reach out to people. And don't just do it one time. Like somebody stopped me yesterday, they're like, Tim, I sent you an email. What the hell, Tim, you know? Like, you know how many emails I get? You know, so like, I said, send it more than once. Like, you know, just nag me. You gotta look. You gotta nag the guy. Gotta nag the woman, whatever. Because we get too much. But you gotta be relentless that way. And then, what else? Collaborations, networking. What's another thing that was really big? Build a team. Lord. Like, you know, you'll find people active, hashtag to death on every social media platform. Don't just post it, find like 5 hashtags. On Instagram, I put like 10 hashtags in every post. Facebook, same thing. Hashtag happy. Do it. That's how you get awareness. What else? Blogs. Work with people in blogs. I know I have. Progressive. One thing I've learned, and my channel used to be called Progressive News with Tim Black, and people be turned off immediately. You know what I'm saying? Like, okay, because the title. So I dropped the title, and then we hit 100,000. I didn't change the content. And when I talk, I say, yeah, I'm progressive. But the title, like that, having that in the title helped me. You know, just because people labels, like, if you're letting Bill O'Reilly tell people what progressivism is, of course they're gonna hate it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, realistically, you know. So that helped me. Hopefully when we go to the Q&A, I can answer specific questions. But yeah, don't quit, collaborate, network, bug the hell out of people you like to get exposure, and yeah, that's a good starting point.
Okay, now we'll take some questions. Are you in the back? Right there. Thanks.
Okay, different media types. I'd like to address comedy. Is comedy an appropriate vehicle for revolution?
I think it's good for nothing. A vehicle for you know, maybe the terminology is a little bit. I don't know if it's a vehicle for revolution, but it definitely can work in the fight. It can be a tool in the tool bag. That's what I think it's useful for. And you know, Jimmy and I have been talking about how ridiculous it is that 2 comedians are some of the, you know, in a certain sense, I guess, main anti-war voices on the media. Like, and to me that's very sad. But it obviously also speaks to what people are willing to listen to spend time with. I think it's a good way to kind of trick people into listening to topics that they otherwise fall asleep, 12 seconds in. So I think it's another tool in the tool bag. I do not think that I can recall.
Lee's being really humble. Julian Assange said you and Jimmy were the most outspoken anti-war speeches
You phrased it a little bit better than he did. He said, "What does the anti-war left have? Lee Camp and Jimmy Dore?" Question mark. I still take it as a compliment, but I know we're running short of time, so I'll conclude with this. I do think it's an important tool in the tool bag towards revolution. I don't think I can recall a revolution that took place with only comedy. So I think there's a lot of other very important things that need to take place. I think you need straight up shows, news shows. You need activist shows like Eleanor. So there's a lot that needs to happen. But.
Well, now I'm blanking on who said this, but
Mark Twain.
Oh, okay. Oscar Wilde, I think, said, "If you want to tell people the truth, make them laugh or they'll kill you."
Yeah.
So I wanted to tell the truth, and I was already in a comedy club, so I figured, what the hell, make it funny. And so, when I was playing comedy clubs, you have to entertain everyone, right? That's the difference between music and comedy. You can go to a country music club, you can go to a hard rock or a punk rock, or there's all, and so you know what you're getting. When you go to a comedy club, everybody goes to a comedy club, right? So Trump voters and and Medea Benjamin, and so she doesn't go to but so I had to learn how to couch everything I said and how to word it in a way that was accessible, and so people didn't judge me. I had to make them like me first. And so to get back to your question is that I think it can be a big help. Jon Stewart really showed, he was great at exposing hypocrisies and showing you that the politicians didn't really believe what they were saying. And I think humor, can just focus in such the brevity of it, right? Unlike this answer. That's the beauty of comedy. It can say, it can say a book full of things in one joke, and that's what I like about it. Like when I say I like to watch, I like listening to Donald Trump speeches, right? Because every once in a while I'm in the mood to watch a Hitler documentary, but I want to hear it narrated by Gary Busey. And that, sometimes it would take me a half hour to say everything that joke means. And when you get it like that, you know exactly what I mean, where I stand, and I think it helps. And I think it helps, certainly, it helps make revolution appealing, right? And if you can laugh at the things that scare you the most, that's when you conquer them.
Speaking of making it appealing, fucking still have some fun during this. Like revolution, part of it needs to be fun. Otherwise, people are not gonna join a cause. It's just like, oh god, just flags that say like, oh god. So I think that is the other benefit of comedy. Yeah.
Will we take another question?
Tim just listed probably 4 or 5 tips for people just getting started in the media. Go on down the line and give us newbies your best single bit of advice.
Oh, for new comedians?
No, people in the media.
Oh, for people in the media?
Progressive people working to get the word out.
Don't stand in front of a white wall.
Green?
I would get a little color behind you. Honestly, new media is just, if you can tell the truth and speak from your heart, right? So when I was doing comedy clubs, I had to try to do both, but I spoke from my head a lot because that's just the way it was going, and I was told you can't talk about the things I was talking about, and I had to trick people into listening like Lee said. But then when I started YouTube, And you know, I was considered, I think, relatively successful as a stand-up comic. I had several Comedy Central specials, and I headlined clubs all around the country, and you know, internationally also. But you know, when I started my YouTube page or my YouTube show, I just started speaking from my heart, and I didn't script it as much. I used to really rely on my scripts. And so you can't do that for me. If I wanted to do, you know, 2-hour show a day on YouTube, I couldn't rely on a script. I just had to speak extemporaneously. And that's when I really, really connected with people. And that's when it went from 0 to 250,000 subscribers like within 18 months, you know. And I never had that kind of connection with people with all the work I put into comedy and all that stuff. People enjoyed it, but I don't think people would drive 3 hours to see it. And now people will cross the country to see the show, do it live. So my advice would be, speak from your heart, whatever that is, and you gotta take off that censor.
You know, additionally, it's kind of connected to what Tim was saying. You have to deliver on time. So if you're really interested, you have to do it steady.
Yes.
You know, you just can't do it randomly because people become very like, oh my God, well, do they have something? They'll go to your channel, they'll go to your website, you know. So if you deliver consistently, you will build your audience. It's up to you and your effort ultimately.
That's a great piece of advice. Drop on time. I read a book about how to, and I forget even who the guy wrote it, but he said, make sure you drop on time, and don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and make sure you drop on time. So I did a podcast, so my podcast is still going. I started, I think, 10 years ago. And I've never missed still. We drop it every Friday. And no, we drop it every Friday.
The people with the on-time speech were a half hour late, by the way. But I absolutely agree. And when I was starting my YouTube channel, that was the thing that opened it up for me too. Was I decided I can't make everything perfect. I just have to get it out. I have to do, it was like 2 a week, and they had to come out. It was like, and I wasn't used to that. I was used to, you know, you write a bit for stand-up comedy and you perfect it and you go on stage and you polish it and all that stuff, but it was like, no, I have to get this, you know, 5-minute thing, and whatever it was doing, it's got to come out twice a week. And so you just have to be regular, because you can, it takes a long time to gain that many people, but you can lose them like that if they don't know if your show's going to come out or whatever.
Like who are you trying to talk to? Are you trying to talk to other progressives, or are you trying to make some conversions? See, that's important. So when we, like me, I'm trying to make conversions. Because you can talk to the choir all day, we're not moving the needle with that. You know what I'm saying? So one suggestion would be, talk about other issues that aren't just strictly politics. I know it sounds creepy, but do it. Like, you know, like something that happens, something, I don't know, take what's going on with the NFL right now. You talk about that, and then you frame it in politics. There's a political edge to that. And then you reach all those people who didn't know who you were, who are not necessarily progressive, but you know, they kind of poking around to see what's out there. It's like a hack for getting more awareness. Because what happens is, if you know, every progressive issue that comes out, all these guys are going to do videos. You're going to be competing against them. But if they don't do a video on Michael Bennett almost being shot in Las Vegas, now you got another audience. You bring them to the table. So that's what I do. It's my hack for being really, really small.
Jimmy just took that idea.
He did? Oh, Jimmy.
You're still awesome, Tim.
Thank you.
You're in the front.
Oh, okay. I had a question about, we've been talking mainly about visual media, about how do you promote great written media, like someone like Caitlin Johnston?
Same thing. Same thing. Caitlin Johnstone's a friend of mine. Same thing. You network, right? So like one of the reasons why our articles get so much play is because we share.
Yes.
Right. So sharing is more that should defeat the censorship. Like if you share something on your profile, your friends are going to see it. Now Google may step on it, but sharing is where it's at. As far as blogs, networking, right? So if you put out a great blog post, you want some legs like Caitlin gets, well, she works with like H.A. Goodman. She works with me. She works with a number of other people who will retweet and share on various social media. That's how her name gets spread, and that's how the message gets spread. So, yeah, sharing and networking once again, and bugging the hell out of people. Don't be timid, just keep going. I've had some great guests on my show. They didn't say yeah the first time. Nina Turner, Tim Canova, Jill Stein, and kept at it.
And yeah, just retweet her stuff, and I also support her on Patreon.
Yeah.
So I think she's really courageous, and I like that she punches up.
What was your name?
Caitlin Johnson.
One thing I think
Johnson is
niches,
awesome, by the way. Awesome.
She is.
I think niches are just so important right now, and that goes especially to blogs. I mean, it goes to all media. I mean, YouTube, podcasting, and stuff like that. But you know, especially blogs. You hear about a lot of successful blogs like, oh, this person is into sports, but they also have this weird left-wing point of view, and they marry the two. You know, you see that kind of stuff happening, and so there's other people that are into certain types of sports and also left-wing politics that are going to migrate to that. So I think especially with
I'm sorry, Dave Zirin.
yeah, that's actually who I was, yeah, so you see stuff like that, and I think that is especially important. I mean, especially like in the comedy world, like I've seen so many comics that like, you know, they know a lot about the NBA or something like that, so they start this comedy podcast, but also about the NBA or whatever. I think that's probably more important now than ever before, like really just honing in your niche. Pretend like you only have one fan that cares about you, even though you don't. You hopefully have more.
We have time for one more question. In the back.
I have a comment. Tim Berners-Lee was the creator of the World Wide Web, and he wrote a book called Weaving the Web, and I would highly suggest everybody read it. Particularly it's very entertaining up front. It talks about the browser histories and stuff, and I was there, so I can, you know. But here's the deal. The whole purpose, and I think it's a really useful discussion point for this room or others, that the purpose of the web was to create a worldwide library. And that is what we're creating in a semantic and a matrixed way through the World Wide Web is a web of meaning. And that everything, if we take off all of the discussion points and the silos of those discussions and move them away, and understand that what we're trying to create through both the media of all sorts, as well as these discussion points and building the architecture and the platforms behind it that support it, that what we're doing is creating a library, and that we can do it purposefully. We can do it on purpose. We don't have to use their frames to discuss those things. And if you want to talk about getting around those things that they're creating, you know, in front of us to say, no, you can't talk, you can't relate those things. And to Tim's point there is, yes, the links are very important, and how do we do that? You know, if you want to study old hyperlink things in Apple technology from back in the 80s, you know, I invite you to go do that. But the real, I believe, the secret, and certainly comments, please, about what library are you creating? What web of meaning are we creating as both progressives and as people that are interested in moving this discussion and this party forward, really? What does this dictionary look like? Three-dimensionally. So.
God, such an obscure question.
Yeah.
What does our dictionary look like?
Mine is a pocket dictionary.
You wanted to add something?
Yeah, really. First of all, I don't think it's an accident that comedians are the pioneers of this media, because every comedy show is a movie. You know, you write it, you produce it, you create it, and you're one man or one woman band. And really, why you're succeeding, why they're going to fail, is that you're doing it for less money. You're a gorilla, and they're an aircraft.
Ah, shucks.
I mean, really, it's not sustainable what they're doing. You know how much it costs for Rachel Maddow to produce one show? She probably has 10 researchers. You know, and
Is it over $1,000?
But you're operating like, you know, bananas. And so that's why.
Projected tonight is 5 people. Daily show is roughly 150.
But
We have 5 people also.
Technology.
And we're on a Cepillo budget, which is shoestring in Spanish. I learned that this year.
Eleanor's 2 people, and her show's incredible.
One question of you, Lee, and I watch it, so there's nothing behind this. I just really am curious, because I haven't heard anybody address it. Now with the Russian stuff, what is with RT, and how have you gone through your analysis? And I like Ed Hughes.
I'm unfamiliar. What Russia stuff? I mean, it is weird being on the, like, not the inside, but whatever, the middle of the spiral of fucking nonsense, because it's like, it's WMD all over again. And you're sitting there watching it, thinking the nation's lost their mind, especially the mainstream media.
You're absolutely
the corporate.
I'm talking about
No, I get to that. But the corporate media's lost their mind. But anyway, in terms of me being there, it comes down to, if you want to say anything corporate, anti-corporate in our world, anything against this ruling corporate totalitarianism, then there's the number of television channels you're allowed to do it on. I mean, these guys have all found a way around TV. But the number of television channels you're allowed to do it on is like 2, maybe. So I'm not the only place that gives me that freedom that I've been able to find. And, I write every word that I say on the show, and no one's ever told me to say anything. And as I mentioned at the very beginning of this thing, you've got people like Melissa Harris-Perry saying she's not allowed to talk about Beyonce. So the level of freedom I have is tremendous.
Can I just make one more point to that? When I was talking earlier about what got me on this path was the Iraq War, and I was a comedian, and I couldn't. So, part of being a comedian when you tour is that you have to do morning radio shows. And I was in Florida, maybe it doesn't matter, but you go into these, it used to be you had to drive all around the city to go to radio stations, right? Now you just oftentimes you just go to one building for the city. And then, and Clear Channel has all their radio stations there on several floors, and you just go, here's the hard rock, here's the country, here's this, you just keep going around in a circle, and you promote. And it was when Howard Stern was they were censoring him pretty heavily, and I think it was because he decided to go against the Iraq War, and they were coming down on him for, being dirty. And so I would go on these radio shows in the morning, and the producer would meet you before you walked into the studio, and said, okay, you can't talk about the Iraq War, you can't talk about George Bush, and you can't talk about Howard Stern. And I'm like, what?
What's
that
left?
happened at one morning, and I was like, okay, I went to Clear Channel, and I got the same thing, and I go, but Howard Stern's not on Clear Channel, he's on somebody else, CBS, there's only 3. And they go, yeah, it doesn't matter. I go, he's not even on your network, it doesn't matter, you can't talk about it. So, because I guess it had to do with they're just afraid of everything. So that was back in 2003, right? So imagine how much worse it has gotten, right? So not only do they not let people like me talk about it, but they pay people like me to talk about it in the wrong way, and they do it.
Can I add just one question that I think has a lot of relevance for this conference? I know I'm stepping out a little bit, but okay. There's been some talk about like pettiness in the left and how much infighting we have, and also some questions throughout the conference about how we also find ways of really undermining people who put themselves in a more conservative category because they have obviously some very significant blind spots. And I wanted to hear, especially since you guys are the media people, how you see yourselves doing this now, and also perhaps improving on what I see as one of the most important things you can do, which is really building up that mass movement through your work that without compromising the truth, and you kind of spoke to this some, without compromising the truth is broad enough to actually create a mass movement that doesn't just speak directly to people who already have significant understanding of these issues.
Well, I'd like to speak to the first part of that question about the pettiness. I don't really care about that. Like, people disagree about stuff. Cool, man. Like, that's part of the internet. We just because we're progressive, we can disagree with each other. And sometimes it may get a little chippy. But also, when you get a little chippy, that's also good. Because now the conversations get bigger and bigger. As long as it doesn't get too personal. That's what you mean. Like,
and that happens all the time.
Yeah, we go after each other like, your mother dressed you funny and you got, your car stinks, like that stuff, no. But when we disagree on issues, and it bubbles up. Like for real, like I would love to go after Lee on something, and Lee go back after me, and then you know what? How much play you get out of that? That's a good thing. That's how I got on the map by going after a guy who had like 1 million subscribers. But people have to have the ability to communicate. Like people know Jordan Sheridan and I had fallen out. Like it was kind of big on the internet, but we never met each other, right? So finally we met and we talked, and we're cool, right? Because we met in real life. So, but it helped me. Like I thought, like, oh my God, I'm gonna be destroyed because TYT guy doesn't like me. And he's called me this or called me that. But what happened was I picked up 3,001 subscribers, right? Like so, I had to ride it out, and that was even great because I went on Jordan's show. And, he's gonna come on my show, so it's good. I understand what Eleanor is saying. It's like it doesn't make people feel good when their friends fight. I get that, right? But it's not serious. It's like, it's just a difference of opinion. My friend Jamal in the back, Jamal Thomas, we had a little thing, and I'm gonna apologize to him as soon as I get back there, because it doesn't matter, and I'm glad he's at this conference, and I'm glad more people know about him, and I'll hopefully add a little bit to do with that.
It doesn't matter as long as it doesn't stop us from achieving our common goals.
And you make it, right, so don't stop yourself. Now, if I were to let my tip with Jordan stop me and I go, oh God, he said mean things, then I lose and my viewers lose. But I'll tell you another thing. You have an obligation as a content creator. Like, I didn't always, what I did was I talked a lot about Bernie at every election stop. And sometimes it was painful because he lost. But it wasn't up to me if I had to go out and make that video, because it was an obligation to my viewers. So when things happen, people want to know, what does Jimmy think about it? What does Eleanor think about it? What does Ron think? What does Lee think? And they're sitting there waiting for your take. They value that. So you can't let a little infighting or bad words or anything, or social media drama, or shadow banning, or any of that stop you, because the people are counting on you. And me, I'm sustained by my viewers, not advertisers. Only reason why I have a show, because people contribute to my show directly via Patreon. So that's a model that Lee told me about a year ago, and I didn't implement it until recently. Lee said, go membership based, let your viewers pay. So
when do I get those royalties?
It's in the mail.
I would say, just to speak to that real fast, I agree, don't let it stop you from doing what you do, but also don't take shit. And I don't mean that like somebody says you're ugly, I mean like actual threats. And as a woman in particular, when you put content out there, you will get rape threats, you will get death threats. And people have the ability to dox you. So know that that's a possibility, but don't shy away from doing what you do, because as Tim mentioned, there are people, and it's not that people are counting on just you to do it, but people are counting on all of us. Not just people sitting up here, but you guys as well are counting on you to do what you do. So I think it's definitely important to, if somebody says some stupid shit to you and you're like, okay, well let's back up a second. Let's talk about what did we originally want to get out of this. I didn't want to talk about your mom. I didn't want you to talk about mine. But let's get back to the original point, which was, Bernie's foreign policy or some shit. Then let's be adults about it, which is really hard on the internet for some reason. I don't know why. But try to avoid that, and also, from my perspective, don't be afraid to just exit it.